My son called me from the hospital parking lot to tell me his wife had just given birth to my first grandchild. That same night, from the same parking lot, he asked me to sign over my house. Not in those words. "It never is it?" He said, "Mom, we've been thinking. The baby's here now, and the condo is too small, and you've got all that space, and the market's never going to be better than it is right now, and we just thought, if you ever considered pulling some equity out, we could all benefit." He said, all. He meant them. He said benefit. He meant a down payment on a place in Oakville, the neighborhood his wife Serena had been circling on real estate apps for 3 years like a hawk, watching something it hadn't decided to eat yet. I said, "Let me think about it." That's what I said. After 31 years of nursing 12-hour shifts, after the duplex in Hamilton I'd bought on my own in 1998, when the bank looked at a single woman with a toddler and made me feel like I was asking for a personal favor. After all of that, I said, "Let me think about it," and hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen with the overhead light humming and the baby monitor app my son had sent me already installed on my phone, showing a sleeping face I hadn't held yet. 3 months later, I got a letter from a mortgage company I had never heard of. It was addressed to me. My name, my address. It thanked me for my recent inquiry and outlined the preliminary terms of a home equity line of credit in the amount of $180,000, pending my signature and a formal appraisal. My inquiry. I had made no inquiry. I had not called anyone. I had not filled out a form or clicked a link or breathed a word to any lender about any equity in any home. But there was my address on the envelope, my name at the top of the letter, and a reference number that, when I called the number on the letterhead that afternoon, a very pleasant young man confirmed was connected to an application that had been started on my behalf. On my behalf. I want to tell you what I did next, because it matters to the rest of this. I didn't call my son. I didn't call Serena. I didn't call anyone. I sat with that letter for 2 days. I read it 4 times. And then I called my friend Adeze, who has been a paralegal for 26 years and tells me the truth even when I'm not ready to hear it, and I read it to her over the phone. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Harriet, who else has access to your personal information?" "My son has a key to my house," I said. "He's had one since his father passed. Does he know your SIN? Your date of birth? Previous address history?" "He grew up in my previous address," I said. Adeze was quiet again, then she said, "I'm not saying he did anything illegal. But somebody started this application, and it wasn't you. I already knew that. I just needed someone else to say it out loud so I could stop pretending I didn't. My name is Harriet Osei. I'm 63 years old. I came to Canada from Accra when I was 22, with a nursing degree, $300, and a letter of introduction to a hospital in Hamilton that my uncle's colleague had arranged. I worked every shift they offered me for the first 5 years. Night shifts, double shifts, the ones nobody else wanted on Christmas Eve and the long weekend in August. I sent money home when I could. I learned the geography of this country through the hospitals I moved between. Hamilton, then Kitchener, then eventually Guelph, where I settled because the cost of living made sense, and the school my son Marcus attended had a French immersion program and a librarian who actually remembered what books he liked. Marcus's father Winston passed when Marcus was 9. Cardiac event on a Tuesday morning, here and then not. We had been married for 11 years, and I had loved him completely, and I will not spend much time on that grief here, except to say that it reshapes you in ways you don't fully understand until much later, and that some of the ways it reshaped me made me give my son things I should have made him earn. Not money, something harder to name. A certainty that I would always absorb whatever he needed absorbed, that my love had no floor he could fall through. I built a life after Winston. It was not easy, and it was not fast, but it was mine. The house on Spruce Crescent in Guelph, 3 bedrooms, detached, with the big maple in the backyard that drops leaves from September to November, and that I love anyway. I paid it off in 2019, 4 months before I turned 56. I wrote the last check myself, and I sat at this same kitchen table, and I cried, not from sadness. From the specific feeling of something you worked for with your whole body, finally being completely yours. The house is worth somewhere around $690,000 now. I know this because the city assessment came last year and because I am not a woman who doesn't know what her assets are worth. Serena knows this too. She has known it, I believe, for some time. I want to be fair about Serena because my son loves her and because the truth about a person is rarely all one thing. She is not a cruel woman. She is an ambitious woman who grew up without much and decided early that she would never be without much again, and that the fastest route to security was through people who already had it. I recognized the logic because I had once had a version of it myself. The difference is that I built something. Serena prefers to redirect what's already been built. She is not wrong that the condo is too small. It is 700 square feet in a building in Mississauga, and she and Marcus and the baby, who is named Theodore, but who I think of privately as the reason I'm telling this story at all, are genuinely crowded. I understand wanting more room. I understood it. What I did not understand, and what the letter from the mortgage company helped me understand very clearly, was that Serena had apparently decided that the equity in my house was a resource she was entitled to access before I had agreed to offer it. I found out later how it had started. Not all at once. In pieces, the way you always find out things you were protected from knowing. Marcus had mentioned to Serena, sometime in the fall, that I'd said, "Let me think about it," when he asked about pulling equity. Serena had decided that was a yes pending paperwork. She had found an online mortgage pre-application for a lender that allowed a third party to begin the process on behalf of a property owner. Meant, I think, for adult children helping elderly parents who weren't comfortable with forms. The form required my legal name, date of birth, address, SIN, and estimated property value. Marcus had my SIN because I had given it to him 3 years earlier when he was doing my taxes on TurboTax, and I couldn't find my NOE. He had told me afterward he'd memorized it in case I ever needed it quickly. He had used it, not with bad intention, I think. I want to believe that, and I mostly do. I think he genuinely believed I had agreed in principle that the application was just moving a slow process along, that I would be glad someone had done the legwork. I think Serena had framed it to him exactly that way. I think he'd let her because she was his wife, and because it was easier to let her than to question her. And because my son, despite being 34 years old and a capable person in many ways, has never quite learned to live in the discomfort of disagreeing with the person he sleeps beside. That is a thing I have watched for 3 years and worried about and never known how to say without sounding like a mother who can't let go. I called a days back the second day. I told her what I had pieced together. She said, "Harriet, do you know what this actually means?" I said, "They can't get the loan without my signature, and I haven't signed anything." "Right," she said. "So right now it's just an incomplete application." "But Harriet, they didn't ask you. Someone used your personal information to start a financial process on your property without your explicit consent. That has a name." "I know what it's called," I said. "Do you want to do anything about it?" I thought about that for a long time. Then I said, "I want my son to look me in the eye and tell me what he did." She said, "That's not nothing. Do you want me there?" "No," I said, "but I want you on the phone afterward." I called Marcus and asked him to come for dinner that Saturday. Just him. I said the baby was too small for the drive yet, which was true, and I did not mention Serena, which was deliberate. When he arrived, I had made jollof rice because it is the thing I make when I need to feel like myself, and I let him eat most of it before I put the letter on the table between us. He looked at it. His face did the thing faces do when they recognize something they'd hoped had disappeared. "Mom," he started. I let him talk. That's something I've learned in 31 years of nursing. You let people say what they're going to say before you respond, because sometimes they tell you something important in the telling, something they didn't mean to give you. He told me Serena had suggested it. He told me he'd thought I'd basically agreed. He told me the lender had seemed legitimate and it was only supposed to be the beginning of a conversation. He told me he should have called me first. He said that last part, looking at the table. "You should have," I said. "Mom, it's just an application. Nothing's been signed. We can just cancel it." "I know nothing's been signed," I said. I know that because I am on the title of this house alone, and any lender worth their license would have called me before advancing a single step past a pre-application. And they did. That letter is them calling me. So yes, nothing is signed. But I want you to hear what you did, Marcus, not what Serena suggested. What you chose to do. You used my SIN, my information, on my house without asking me. He was quiet. You didn't ask me, I said again. I said, let me think about it, and instead of waiting, someone decided to move the process forward as if my thinking was just a formality. As if I would eventually come around, and it was more efficient to start the paperwork than to respect that I hadn't answered yet. He looked up. I can see now that was wrong, he said, but we're not trying to take anything from you. It's just equity. It's not like we were selling the house. It's my equity, I said. In my house, on my name, and the decision to access it is mine. Only mine. Not a process you start on my behalf, because you've decided I'll agree eventually. He didn't argue after that. But I could see on his face the particular expression men get when they've been told something they know is true and are deciding how to feel about the person who told them. Half remorse, half something else. The something else was Serena, I think. The understanding that he was going to have to go home and explain this in a way that would not make him the failure. I cleared the plates, I put the kettle on, and then I told him something I had been saving without knowing I was saving it. I have thought about your situation, I said. The condo, the baby, wanting more space. I understand all of it, and I had been thinking about whether there was a way I could help. Not the equity loan. I don't want a line of credit against my house. But I have some money set aside. Your father's insurance policy, what I didn't spend on the funeral and the years after. I've never touched it. I was keeping it for something real. Marcus was very still. I was going to offer you some of it, I said. As a gift toward a down payment, not all of it. Enough to matter. I hadn't decided how much yet, because I hadn't decided if I was ready to, because you hadn't asked me properly. You'd sent your wife to maneuver around me instead. His face changed. I'm not saying this to make you feel small, I said. I'm saying it because you need to understand the difference between asking someone who loves you for help and arranging things so that by the time they find out, it's already in motion. One of those things I can say yes to. The other one I cannot reward, even when I want to give you everything I have. He put his hands over his face. I felt the particular sorrow that is specific to mothers. The sorrow of watching your child understand something painful that you could have spared them from if you'd just given in. That's the trap, by the way. That's the thing they count on. Your love is the leash, and the kinder you are, the longer it gets. I served the tea. I let him sit with it. He called Serena from my driveway before he left. I didn't hear what he said, but he was on the phone for 20 minutes, and when he came back inside, his face had changed again, and he said, "She's upset." I imagine she is, I said. She says you're overreacting, that it was just a preliminary step and you're acting like a crime was committed. I looked at my son very carefully. I said, "What do you think?" He was quiet for longer than I'd expected. Then he said, "I think you have every right to be angry." That's all I needed to hear. What followed over the next 2 weeks was instructive in ways I hadn't planned for. I had not intended to upend anything. I had intended to have a conversation with my son and establish that my house and my financial information were mine to manage, and that no process involving either would happen without my explicit and prior consent. That was all. But Serena does not experience the word no as a data point. She experiences it as an obstacle. She called me on the Tuesday. Her voice was warm in the way that voices are warm when warmth is a strategy. "Harriet," she said, "she has never called me Mom, which is her right, but she also never calls me anything with genuine affection. I just wanted to talk through this properly," she said, "because I think there's been a misunderstanding, and I don't want this to come between us." "There's no misunderstanding," I said. "I understand exactly what happened." A pause. "Well, I may have been a bit hasty in getting the ball rolling," she said, "but it came from a genuine desire to make things easier for everyone. You've said yourself the house is too big for one person now. I have said that, yes. And Marcus worries about you being alone there. We all do, and the baby needs more space. So this really could work for all of us, Harriet, if you just think about it practically. I have thought about it practically, I said. That's what I do. Another pause. Longer. She said, What exactly are you afraid of? I want you to note that word, afraid. As if my refusal could only come from fear. As if a 63-year-old woman who has owned her home outright since 2019 and who raised a child alone through a widowhood that would have broken some people, as if she could only say no because she was scared of something, not because she understood exactly what was being asked and had decided the answer was no. I'm not afraid of anything, I said. I'm declining. She pushed a little further. I let her. I've found that people who are very good at persuading other people tend to overextend when the persuasion isn't working, and when they overextend, they tell you what they actually think. Serena told me, in the course of that phone call, that the equity in the house was essentially sitting idle. That property wasn't meant to be hoarded. That Marcus had a right as my only child to expect some consideration of his needs, and that frankly, a gesture like this was how families showed they were committed to each other's futures. I let that last sentence sit on the line between us for a moment. Then I said, Serena, I'm going to say this once. This house is in my name. The equity in it is mine. My son's need for more space is real, and I feel it with him, but it does not create an entitlement to my assets. I was considering helping you. I'm less inclined now than I was 3 weeks ago, and the direction I'm moving is not toward more inclination. I'd suggest you let your husband have his own conversations with his own mother. She did not call again. Marcus came by the following Saturday. Alone again. He looked tired in the way that people look tired when they are living inside a conflict and cannot find the end of it. We sat in the backyard under the maple and he said, She's really hurt. I understand that, I said. She thinks you're punishing her, I said. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm maintaining a boundary that should never have needed stating. He picked at a thread on his jacket sleeve. He does that when he's thinking about how to say something. He's done it since he was 7. Mom, he said, are you going to help us or not? And I realized, sitting under my maple on a Saturday afternoon with the neighbor's dog barking 2 yards over, that this was the real question. Not the sin, not the application, not Serena's phone call. This, are you going to help us or not? Said in a tone that suggested there was a version of help that was acceptable and a version that was just cruelty wearing the face of principle. I've been helping you since before you could ask for it, I said. I helped you with my body for 8 months and then I didn't sleep properly for 3 years. I helped you through your father's death while processing my own. I helped you through university, through your first apartment, through the year you and Serena had trouble. And you called me every Sunday sounding like a man at the bottom of a lake. I have never once counted what I gave you, but I'm asking you to count what I'm being asked to give right now. Not money. Something harder. He looked at me. I'm being asked to give you my house, Marcus, not give you a place in it. Give you the asset itself in the form of debt against my name, managed by a lender, for the benefit of a plan I was not consulted on. And to pretend that the way it was set in motion was just enthusiasm, just eagerness, just a preliminary step, not a choice someone made to move forward before I had time to say no properly. That's what I'm being asked to absorb, and I am telling you I won't. Not because I don't love you, because I do. He didn't say anything for a long time. The dog next door finally went quiet. The maple moved a little. I don't want you to hate her, he said finally. I don't hate her, I said. I see her clearly. That's different. He looked at the tree. He has his father's way of going very still when something has landed. Winston used to do that. Find a fixed point and hold it while his mind worked. It always meant the real listening was happening, not the defensive listening, the real kind. After a while, he said, She told me you'd react this way, that you'd make it about control. I nodded. I said, What do you think it was about? Long pause. I think, he said slowly, I think you found out we'd gone around you, and you wanted me to see that I had. Yes, I said, that's exactly what I wanted. He exhaled. Okay. He said it the way people say okay when they mean something more complicated than agreement. Mom, I'm sorry for using your information without asking. That was wrong. I knew it was, and I told myself a story about it, and that was also wrong. That's all I needed, I said. That and this. You talk to me. Not through her, not around me, not by setting things motion that assume my consent. You talk to me. We're the ones who've been family the longest. Act like it. He nodded. Still looking at the tree. We didn't resolve everything that afternoon. That would be a neater story than the one I'm telling. What happened over the months that followed was quieter and more uneven, the way real things are. Serena and I are not warm. We may never be warm. But she has not called my home a storage facility for idle assets again, and I count that as progress. Marcus started coming over on his own more. Not always with a reason, sometimes just to sit in the backyard or fix the door on the garden shed that Winston always meant to get to. He brought Theodore one Sunday in February, just the two of them, and I held my grandson properly for the first time, and he looked up at me with the grave, slightly unfocused attention of a 4-month-old encountering a face. And I thought, there you are, I've been waiting. The mortgage application was canceled. I called the lender myself and confirmed it in writing. No equity line of credit exists against this house. No one can open one without my signature on the original documents and a lawyer present. Because I added that condition to the title last November, a thing Adaze told me I could do and that I did quietly without announcing it to anyone, because I am a woman who has learned to know where the door is. I did help them eventually. On my terms, on my timeline. Winston's insurance money. Some of it went into a TFSA in Theodore's name. Not to Marcus, not to Serena, not to a down payment on a house in a neighborhood where I don't think they can actually afford to live yet. To Theodore, set aside, growing slowly, for the kind of help that will matter when he's old enough to use it. I told Marcus what I'd done. He cried, which surprised me. He said, "Why Theodore? Because he didn't do anything to earn it," I said, and that's the best reason to give someone something. Before they've had time to believe they deserve it. Serena hasn't said much about it. I think she understands that I am not a locked door. I am a door that opens for people who knock, and she is slowly, reluctantly, learning to knock. Marcus asked me once, not long ago, sitting at this kitchen table in the same seats we've sat in his whole life, if I'd been angry, really angry, not just principled. Yes, I said, I was angry. At me? At both of you, I said, but at you more because you knew better and you let it happen anyway. He nodded. He had asked me an honest question, and he got an honest answer. And that, too, is progress. I have been a nurse for 31 years. I have held people's hands through things that don't have names. I have learned that the most important thing you can give someone who is in pain is not comfort. It is clarity. Comfort says, it's all right. Clarity says, here is what is happening, and here is what we are going to do. Comfort is easier. Clarity is the one that actually helps. My son thought he needed a house in Oakville, and what he actually needed was to understand that his mother has a spine and his wife has a limit, and those two things, understood properly, are the foundation of a relationship that might actually last. I can't build that for him. I could only make it visible. The maple is budding now. It does that every spring, earlier than you'd expect, little red clusters before the leaves. Winston used to say it was the most optimistic tree he'd ever seen. I think about that when I sit under it. I think about what I built in this house, alone and not alone, and what it means that it's still mine. My grandson is going to grow up with a grandmother who kept her house and her word in the same year. I think that's worth something. I think someday he might even understand why. The letter from the mortgage company is in a folder in my filing cabinet, behind the title deed. I kept it because I have learned in this life that the important things should be kept in writing. And because someday, if Theodore ever needs to understand what kind of woman his grandmother was, I'd rather he read the evidence than take anyone's word for it.